So we are, I think we can all agree, slowly but surely starting to emerge from the pandemic now. And this really starts to open up more questions about our economy, how it operates, and how we recover going forward. Because there's whole sections of the economy currently really, really suffering from labor shortages. Um, that's pretty much the main one. And this is no surprise because we have been very, very, very much dependent on labour coming from the EU. And bear in mind, before anyone said, oh, that was just the cheap labour. No, we had minimum wage rules. This made sure that they were being paid exactly the same as anyone else who took that job. Unless you were an asylum seeker, then you got paid less, which is why I always say if you are pro worker, you should be pro for upping that asylum seekers minimum wage to match our wage as well. But partly because of lowering birth rates, we have seen less and less have a lowering, so we say, native workforce. And this is going to cause huge problems. In fact, as I've said before, one of the things the pandemic really did, and this shortage that we are experiencing, we would have experienced it if the pandemic hadn't happened, maybe about a year or two on from the initial Brexit actually sort of say, quote, happening. But the pandemic just put an accelerated foot onto this and has caused the problem to accelerate a lot quicker. And especially in hospitality with bars and restaurants, they are really suffering, really, really suffering. I mean, I know you can see on here the story on Euronews about this, which is actually quite interesting, is about custodial workers in offices and things like that. There's a massive shortage in that area as well. Hold on, there we go. So it's not just, the bars and restaurants. There's a whole sectors that are really, really suffering from these labor shortages. So it's not just the idea of, oh, we're going to up the wages. Well, if you could have upped the wages before, why didn't you do so now, only when you're having this, shortage of workers? Again, this spirals off into a whole, anti-capitalism markets, why we need stronger unions, etc., etc. But I want to cover today hospitality and bars and what is happening around them. Because owning sort of the bars and restaurants, especially restaurants, I was always really shocked to find out when I sort of first went into marketing. And I got to speak to like restaurant owners or people who set up restaurants. And the minimum time that a restaurant is open is roughly around 3 years. Most restaurants will fail within their first, I think it's 12 months. But for a restaurant, and a good restaurant, to survive at least more than 3 years shows that, hey, it's a good restaurant and has been well run, because restaurants actually run at a quite tight profit margin, because it's all about, getting those people, through the door, paying for their food. And sometimes, if, let's say, you need at least, let's say, 10 couples a week to, pay the bills, if that should fall to maybe 8 or 9 couples a week, just that one couple not turning up a week to your restaurant can cause you huge financial problems. So now that there's a lack of staff thrown into there as well, people are still, even though they are sort of heading back out, some restaurants are seeing, them slowly pick back up. But again, that means you've got to have the restaurant open as well. And there's all sorts of associated costs that go into that, into the running the restaurant. So we're going to jump into this article and find out more about what's going on in the restaurant and bar industry. So a quarter of pubs and restaurants and hotels have been forced to shut up shop or close for part of the week because of the UK's chronic staff shortage, new figures reveal. There are almost 200,000 vacant positions across the country, with fears that the problem could even be worse over the Christmas period as hospitality firms compete with retailers and delivery businesses for staff. UK hospitality found that thousands of pubs and restaurants had been forced to slash opening hours, while 1 in 5 expected deliveries are not making it to the restaurants' kitchens. According to the industry's body poll of over 700 members, representing at least 90% of the UK pubs, bars, and restaurants, revenue is down by a fifth as the result of this issue. A separate survey found that almost half of bars and nightclubs have not been able to operate at full capacity because they cannot find enough security staff. When you post jobs, there are no applicants. Nobody wants to work in hospitality anymore, said Lewis McCann, the business development manager at the Signature Group, which runs dozens of pubs and restaurants across Scotland. The company has cut its total opening hours by around 20%, with the number of its pubs closed on Mondays now and Tuesdays. We've lost people to Brexit, and I just don't think Britain is an attractive place to work anymore. It's also a lot harder to come and work here, McLaren said. I've got a lot of people who got a second job while they were on furlough, like driving for Amazon or working at Tesco, and they just simply haven't come back. It was more secure, and they knew that it wasn't going to shut down. It's a huge impact in the confidence in the hospitality as a sector. Businesses say that are going through a tough and brutal time due to the exodus of staff, which is crippling large parts of the UK's food supply chain. The situation is desperate, said McLaren. Every time a phone rings, we are braced for, is it a new COVID case? Is it a resignation? We have done the maths and realised that we do not have enough staff to open on Monday. There is now a growing dismay among the hospitality and the food industry businesses that the government is fighting a rearguard action. Rearguard action against problems that we've repeatedly warned about for months. Ministers have offered fixes that are often seen as short-term, piecemeal, and far too late, while steadfastly refusing to recognise the gravity of the situation or overhauling the post-Brexit immigration system, according to the industry figures. Kate Nichols, the chief executive of the trade body UK Hospitality, warned that without government intervention, the situation is about to get worse. And while COVID had been the primary driving force behind the industry's labour crisis, Brexit is making things worse. At the moment, businesses are able to ride it out because of the business rates relief and the VAT cut. But that will not be sustainable in the long term when that is removed next year. She added there is no sign of improvement, and we have seen a 10% vacancy rate across the sector, and there has been no influx of workers after the furlough ended. There just aren't enough sufficient staff to fulfill all the demands that's out there. Brexit doesn't help with the situation, and it's making things more difficult. For more of the pandemic and hospitality firms are feeling the labour problems more acutely, a fifth of the workforce did not return from furlough, leaving a dearth of experienced and skilled workers such as chefs and restaurant managers. Now the sector is struggling to recruit even for entry-level roles. For every job-seeking role in hospitality, there are approximately 1.7 jobs available according to the Manpower. The recruitment firm has had 4 times the number of hospitality vacancies last month than it did in September. Shalf Uden, who owns the Kusi kitchens of Indian restaurants in London's East End and Essex, said he would soon be forced to operate at just 50% capacity. Skilled quality chefs just aren't on the market for the salaries that make our restaurants viable, he said. He's found that many young people starting their careers favour jobs at large retailers thanks to the better starting salaries and easier working hours. You can only deliver to the maximum capacity with the staff you have, taking on less custom and to make sure that you are satisfying those who you can confidently serve, Uden said. Christmas will not be the same as it was before the pandemic. It's normally the busiest period for the hospitality sector, but with the severe staff shortages, we'll only be able to operate about 50% capacity. Adam Breyer, a Michelin star chef and owner of the Trinity restaurant in Clapham, feels they are facing similar struggles. It has been brutal, he said. Since we've been back after lockdown, we've only had about 3 weeks where our business is fully operational. And for that, it's been very curtailed because there's been a lack of staff. Shuttered restaurants and empty supermarket shelves may be the most visible signs of the supply chain crisis, but behind the scenes, as an ever more difficult situation is unfolding, logistics and agricultural bosses report growing frictions along the way, along the vital arteries that move food in and around the countries. At Heathrow, backlogs in global shipping lanes and container ports have meant that businesses are now flying in stock that would normally travel by sea in a bid to try and ensure Christmas supplies. Despite the wage hikes and offering better working conditions, logistics businesses still have too few people to offload goods at airports, stack them in warehouses, or even transport them. Mike Parr, the chief executive of the PLM, which transports food from air and seaports, said that perishable goods, including flowers and fruit, were often waiting 2 or 3 days in the warehouse at the airport, leading to more waste. Heathrow made large numbers of its logistics staff redundant to cut costs during the pandemic and now cannot find people to replace them, causing a huge backlog of goods, meaning that food is not fresh when it arrives at restaurants and supermarkets. It is a nightmare, and it's only going to get worse, said Mrs. Parr. The pressure on us is at the moment are incredible. The company has found it more and more difficult to find drivers it needs. He warned that the Christmas period will be painful, with the shortage of drivers worsening into December, when the post office typically lures drivers away from their companies with very higher salaries. The government's handling of Brexit has contributed to the problem, and a short-term visa scheme for lorry drivers has done very little to help. The European drivers don't want to come back because the conditions there are much better. Why would they want to come over on a short-term visa? Hopes that the furlough scheme coming to an end would alleviate the problems were indeed very misplaced, and vacancies across the economy have continued to rise, with the number of job postings hitting a record high of 2.7 million last week. So, as you can see, this is just going to be a continuing problem. And we've said and talked about this for almost all the past year since the pandemic's been in operation. So this by no means is even a new scenario. It was known about. But as we've said before, the Tories are so short-sighted in their thinking that they just don't care. Because that's how they operate. They think in short-term solutions because they want those short-term wins. They do not care about having long-term solutions. They are so scared, and you can even see it here. The industry is going, the way we can help relieve these problems, not only on just our industries, but the entire UK economy, is to allow for more immigration. But the Tories are so scared of even opening up that argument, they daren't even touch it with a barge pole. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button down below. And of course, there are links down below to my Patreon page and one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all